Exactly 1 year ago today, the United States of America pulled out of Afghanistan, allowing the Taliban to regain control of the country. The botched withdrawal led to a severe decline of living conditions within the country, despite massive rebuilding efforts. It created a haven for terrorists and cost the lives of 13 U.S. service members. It is a major black eye for the Biden administration and, frankly, for the entire United States. So on this anniversary, let's look back at the withdrawal and examine exactly where we stand today. Joining us now to discuss is our company of military veterans, Chad Robichaux, Cory Mills, and Mark Geist. Cory, I want to start with you. First of all, thank you all for your service. As a veteran of the war in Afghanistan, give me your take as to where we stand right now in terms of Afghanistan, what it means for our troops, how they're dealing with it, and what it means for our country.
Well, Sean, I think that first and foremost, a lot of people are now questioning what the 20-plus years of service, trillions of dollars in taxpayers' expenses, and thousands of lives really stood for. Not to mention the fact that this botched withdrawal has really set the world stage for where we're at from a national security perspective. That's why you see countries like North Korea, who've done more test fires for their missile systems in this 1 year than they did during the entire time under the Trump administration. That's why you're seeing a further aggression by the Russians to go ahead and embolden themselves in Ukraine to try and make sure they get that one road, one belt initiative that Chairman Xi in China is trying to accomplish. But that's also why you're seeing a stronger geopolitical alignment, or an axis of evil, if you will, between China, Russia, and Iran under the Biden administration, because they've seen that with this botched withdrawal, with our willingness to leave Americans behind, with the willingness to sacrifice those who served alongside us for 20-plus years, that we are weaker now and more vulnerable on the world stage than we've ever been. That's what really makes me scared the most.
Yeah. Chad, you did a lot to help get people out. I want to ask you this, though. The U.S. government, you heard the Secretary of Defense, the Biden administration, talk a lot about getting 120-plus thousand people out of Afghanistan. But most of those people really couldn't be vetted. How concerned should Americans be about who ultimately came into our country?
Yeah, I mean, they needed to react. They needed to respond because of the pressure of the optics of them not getting people out. They loaded planes with people who were surging to the gates. The only people that made it to the airport through that first perimeter were allowed to by the Taliban. People with U.S. passports, people with green cards were turned away. I mean, right now, the State Department said we have 74,242 of our allies who are qualified for SIVs still in Afghanistan, plus their family members, so over 300,000 qualified people. Those who mainly came out and came to America were not vetted. They were not the qualified individuals that we're fighting to still get here in the United States. So I think there is a security concern for many of those who came. When they came to the United States, they went to different bases around the United States and were not held there. They were left to go out into the public, much like our southern border. So while I'm a pro evacuation from Afghanistan, obviously we got 17,000 people out. I'm not for unvetting people and bringing them into our country, regardless of where they come from, especially Afghanistan.
Yeah, exactly. There's a big difference between the ones that help the United States and we had documentation on and just pulling people willy-nilly. Mark, you were a hero in helping to save lives at Benghazi. So obviously you understand botched operations. Has the U.S. learned anything when it comes to botched operations? It feels like after that, you would think that we would learn. We would do lessons learned. I look at Afghanistan and go, how did we get this so wrong?
You know, we don't learn. I mean, if you go back into history, you look at going all the way back to the attack on the Marine barracks back in the 80s that killed so many Marines. They did an ARB then, which is an basically the after-action report, an accountability and review board. They did one after the bombings in Nigeria, and they did one after Benghazi. And you know what? All three of those are just cut and paste the same issues that occurred at the next one and the next one. And it's really not much different than the pullout. I mean, they jumped into this too quick, worried more about optics than they were about security and safety. And two, I think they wanted to get out of Afghanistan because they knew then that they were going to go into Ukraine. And you want to see a repeat of history. It's just like back in the 80s with the way we helped and tried to help the Taliban, which ended up being the Taliban, the freedom fighters, supposedly, out of Afghanistan, overthrow Russia. We're putting ammo and weapons and technology into the hands of people that we don't know who they are. And it's no different than what Chad said and what Cory said about the lack of integrity, discipline, and the control that our politicians refuse to allow happen to make sure that we're not arming terrorists and we're not bringing them to this country.
Cory, I asked Congressman Waltz about the effect on morale of current troops. I want to ask you about veterans, because a veterans group asked President Biden to do more to acknowledge the moral injuries that veterans have suffered. So is this a major concern within the veterans community?
Absolutely. I think that many veterans are thinking about their brothers that they, lost while we were overseas and, what it really stood for. And I think that impacts things a lot. But I also see where this administration has started to prioritize things like diversity, inclusion, CRT, and pronouns over what we're really about, which is increased lethality, readiness, and preparedness. And so I think that, this 12 to 15,000 shortage in recruitment is a direct example of the failed morale as a result of a lack of leadership. And I'll tell you, I'm honored to be on this panel. I know Chad Robo very well. He's an absolute hero. Mark Geist is my first time being, but everyone knows the heroic tales of what took place in Benghazi. And I can tell you right now that as someone who helped conduct at least one of the rescues that was happened in Afghanistan, I watched where the Biden administration tried on multiple attempts to actually thwart our efforts to save Americans, not support those efforts. And now that I'm actually going to go into the House, I can tell you that people like Congressman Mike Waltz, myself, and others, we will have an investigation. We will hold those accountable, and we will get transparency for the American people on this botched withdrawal.
Yeah. Chad and Mark, real quick, in 30 seconds each. Chad, I'll start with you. Tell me about the strategic concerns that you have of leaving Afghanistan and what that means for us not being able to operate out of there anymore. Chad, I'll start with you.
It's become a terrorist safe haven as opposed to an international hub to defeat terrorism and keep it at bay in the mountains of Afghanistan. Bagram Air Force Base was the most strategic place on the globe that sat between Iraq, Russia, Iran, and China, and we gave it away. It wasn't ours to give away, but we gave it away to our world's enemies, and now the world's a much more dangerous place because of that.
Mark?
Chad hit it right on the head. I mean, Bagram, you go back in history all the way back to Alexander the Great. That's where he staged his troops before going into India after coming across Iran. And two is we gave up a country that has more minerals for batteries, for electricity, for all of the things that we need, those precious metals. And now China's in there right now taking it all. So not only did we botch the withdrawal, we botched the tactics, and we botched the economic assets that were there for us.
Yeah, Mark, you just said the magic word, China, China, China. What we gave up strategically and in terms of natural resources to China is unbelievable. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Thank you for your service. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. God bless you all.
God bless you.
You bet.